Hi guys and welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to discuss who I would like to see as the next James Bond for Bond 26, directed by the great Denis Villeneuve. I still don't know how to pronounce that man's name. Villeneuve. So here are my top picks. So we've got about five candidates, five gentlemen that I could see as the next James Bond. Now I've got names such as Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Tom Holland, Henry Cavill, Aaron Pierre, Harris Dickinson, Jacob Elordi. They're the kind of top contenders right now, but they are not bad castings, are not bad choices. So I've sort of integrated them into my list. I mean, my number one has been mentioned in the possible contenders for the next James Bond already. And I'm just like, yep, since day one, I'm just like, that guy. But we'll get into that when we get to my number one. So coming in at number five, we have Robert Pattinson. Now I know you think straight away you're just like Batman as James Bond. But let's just say that though. Let's say that out loud, Joe, right? Robert Pattinson, who at one point was the sparkly vampire, the Twilight guy, he then gone on to become a pretty decent actor. You know, The Lighthouse. I can't name any of other films off the top of my head. Should have done my research. But anyway, he's a good actor, right? What do you call it? Fucking Chris Nolan's movie. Tenet. Which is essentially a kind of Bond-esque kind of movie in its own accord. I can see Robert Pattinson being James Bond at some point. Like, casting him as the Batman, you were just like, the sparkly vampire? Forgetting that the guy is actually a pretty decent actor. So I would say Robert Pattinson as James Bond. Now, I know he's then juggling James Bond and the Batman, but it could work. Coming in at number four, right? We have Tom Hiddleston, Loki himself, right? Now, Tom Hiddleston, his name was thrown around years ago, and Barbara Broccoli, if I remember correctly, said something about him being too lanky, too tall, too skinny. And I'm like, cheeky bitch. Like, Tom Hiddleston as James Bond would be exceptional casting, right? But, and here's my massive but, I think Tom Hiddleston as James Bond could only work if they took James Bond back to the kind of 60s kind of era. Like back in the day, you know, and he could be a sort of Roger Moore-esque James Bond. Now, I'm not Roger Moore's biggest fan. I think he was miscast in the role of James Bond. I'm sorry. But I think Tom Hiddleston could go along the lines of being a sort of Roger Moore kind of James Bond. You know, very kind of, you know, very good with the ladies, but also have that little bit of, you know, the eyes of a fucking killer. You know, like Sean Connery, you know, Daniel Craig, all that kind of stuff. I think he'd be great. I really think he'd be great. Like, the guy can act, he can do action, and he's very suave and very, you know, I love Tom Hiddleston. Number three, right? And I've got to kind of choose here because I don't want to, you know, throw in these ones and being like, oh shit, I forgot about that guy. Nicholas Hoult. Now, again, Nicholas Hoult, Lex Luthor, right? Superman this Friday. Cannot wait. Get my tickets booked. Oh, cannot wait. Nicholas Hoult, again, is a very underrated British actor, right? I think he's going to step up his mark with the role of Lex Luthor, right? We know he was in the running for the Batman, which he lost out to Robert Pattinson. We know he auditioned for Superman, which he lost out to David Cornsweet. But he's Lex Luthor. That's a massive deal, right? He was also Beast in the X-Men prequel films. He's a good actor, right? I've watched that guy since About a Boy in 2002, which was like 23 years ago. And then went on to Skins and all that kind of stuff. But he's had some sort of resurgence over the last few years. And I think Lex Luthor is definitely 100% his resurgence that he needs to gain him more roles in bigger films. And I think James Bond could be his next big thing. Coming in at number two is Jack Lowden. Fighting with My Family with Florence Pugh back in 2016, the wrestling movie with Vince Vaughn and The Rock. Like, it's about the wrestler Paige, someone. And I loved that movie, even though I don't remember the last name of the character. But it was the first time I ever saw Jack Lowden. It was the first time I ever saw Florence Pugh. And I was like, that's a future James Bond right there, and a future Bond girl. Now, I know Florence Pugh is rumoured to be playing Moneypenny in this prequel series. It's set in the 50s or 60s. The Moneypenny Diary is based on books. Um, but I'd love to see her either playing a Bond girl or playing Moneypenny to the new James Bond, but in current days, not back in the 50s and 60s. So I remember saying that and being like, Bond girl and James Bond, make it happen at some point. That was 2016, so that's 10 years ago nearly. Well, 9 years ago anyway. So I think it'll still happen. So Jack Lowden is my number two because he's great in Slow Horses, which is with Gary Oldman, which is the Apple TV MI5 thriller series. So it is very James Bond as it is. So it might be too on the nose for him to go from that to then being James Bond, but listen, it's not the worst thing, it works. Like, he already played an MI5 spy, so let's make him the spy. The overall James Bond, come on. Like, Robert Pattinson went from being a sparkly vampire to being the king of the bats with Batman, so why not give Jack Lowden that one? And my number one is Aaron Taylor Johnson, right? Now, Aaron Taylor Johnson, right? Kick ass, right? Craven the Hunter. Bullet Train. In Bullet Train, I was like, damn, he's James Bond. 100% he is James Bond. It was like Daniel Craig in Layer Cake. You're just like, that's James Bond. And then obviously a year later, he became James Bond. Or 2 years later, he became James Bond. So I'm just like, when you watch Aaron Taylor Johnson in Bullet Train, I'm just like, that is James Bond. Cast this man as James Bond. Obviously, 28 years later, again, great performance from Aaron Taylor Johnson. He did say at the premiere, though, he was asked, because he's in the next 28 years later, part two, the Bone Temple coming in January 2026. But he was asked, what's your next project? And he said, I can't talk about it. So now he's added fuel to the fire. Everyone's just like, he's James Bond. Like, if he ain't James Bond, then I don't know. But like I said, I don't mind any of these actors playing James Bond. I really, really don't. But he's my number one pick. 100% number one pick. Like, he's the new face of Omega, the watch, the watch franchise, the watch makers shop, whatever. Anyway, the watch tailors. I don't know. So he's the face of that, and usually, traditionally, you know, each Bond actor is like the face of Omega because that's what James Bond wears, the Rolex, the Omega Rolex. That's a different company. You know what I'm talking about, the watch anyway, the wristwatch. So again, more fuel to the fire, just like Aaron Taylor Johnson is the next James Bond. Comment down below who you could see as the next James Bond. Do you agree with my list? Is there anyone on my list you're just like, that Ethan guy, Jordan, you've hit the ball, you've hit the nail on the head. Oh, I've got hair that I can't seem to shift. Anyway, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.